In my previous life, I was the infamous campus belle. Yet I fell in love with the aloof and cold male god. The female protagonist, who was a top student, also had a crush on the male god. Worried that I would affect his exams, she deliberately intercepted the note I wrote to ask the male protagonist to meet me. As a result, when I was waiting alone, I was hit by a car and died tragically. 8 years later, the male god learned the truth, had a mental breakdown, and perished together with her. In this new life, the female protagonist resolves not to stop our love anymore. She wants to watch with her own eyes that the male protagonist and I live a life worse than that of pigs and dogs. After school, just like in my previous life, I handed the note to my desk mate. Astra. I put my hands together and looked at her devoutly. Please. You must give this to Soren. This is really important. Please. My dear Astra. Astra glanced at me, and a trace of disdain flashed quickly in her eyes. I love using reduplicated words and modal particles, and my voice is naturally sweet and delicate. Based on this, she believes that I am affected and artificial. A real green tea girl. In my previous life, I adored her and regarded everything she said as an imperial edict. When she said that I spoke in an affected way, I tried my best to lower my voice and speak like a duck. But in this life, the halo effect she had on me has long since vanished. I still speak in the way I'm used to. And I patiently waited for her reply. Just like in my previous life. She politely took the note and said softly, "Okay. She and Soren are neighbors. So I would ask her to pass on the note. The college entrance examination is tomorrow. And I'm not confident. I want to see Soren. Perhaps a hug and a kiss from my lover can ease my pre-exam nervousness." But Astra doesn't believe it. She always thinks that I'm a green tea bitch who is seducing Soren, and that I will drag Soren down with me. So in my previous life, she carelessly threw away my note. When she met Soren on her way home, she didn't mention a word about it. But this time, she has been reborn, and she will give the note to Soren. Not because of my request, but because of the hatred in her heart. In my previous life, I didn't know that Astra hated me. She has a delicate and beautiful appearance, excellent grades, and is considerate and polite to others. She is the lead branch secretary of the class, and both teachers and classmates like her. She was also my idol. When the teacher arranged for her to be my desk mate, I was flattered. I carefully put away all the things that had nothing to do with the class, such as small mirrors and extracurricular books. I didn't wear makeup, didn't listen to MP3, and maintained a stiff and upright sitting posture. I was afraid that I might do something wrong and affect her from listening to the class. She was so perfect and excellent. As humble as I was, I felt that I had been stained with a little bit of the glory of a top student just by sitting side by side with her. Bathed in the holy light, I felt full of happiness when I looked at her and couldn't tolerate anyone speaking ill of her. When I proudly declared at home that my new desk mate was the top female student in the liberal arts class of the grade, my scumbag father, as usual, sneered and swore. A top student is not as good as a woman with big breasts. Studying well is not as good as marrying well. I immediately lost my temper and picked up a bench and fought with him. By the time the neighbors skillfully called the police and the community police came to the door skillfully, I had already been kicked several times by him. But he didn't get off easily either. The bench hit his back, and there was a long bloody tear in his t-shirt. This was the price he paid for insulting my muse in front of me. I was the campus belle rumored about privately by my classmates. Along with this title, there were endless vulgar rumors. As the league branch secretary, Astra would speak out to stop the classmates when they spread these offensive and vulgar words. That was also the time when I was most grateful to her and worshipped her the most. I regarded her as my goddess. Later, I learned that in fact, Astra also looked down on me like others. It's just that she valued her own status and wouldn't follow others to spread those vulgar and boring words. I had a puppy love with Soren. However, Astra never thought that there was anything wrong with Soren as a vigorous young man. She only thought that it must be me, a seductive and green tea girl, who used despicable tricks to seduce the cold and abstinent flower on the high mountain. So, in her eyes, The little amorous feelings between me and Soren were all my deliberate and shameless attempts to seduce him. Arya deliberately turned her head and lightly landed a kiss on Soren's face. Instantly, Hedingthal felt me. His ears turned red, and he turned around and looked at her in a flustered way. But she blinked her eyes and said innocently, "Oops. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry." Arya smiled lazily like a fox, and her big eyes sparkled with charm. Soren was just an inexperienced high school student. Where had he ever seen such a pure and alluring amorous feeling? Naturally, his mind was in a mess. And he was willing to bow down for her. Fall for her. He would agree to whatever she said. There was always a bottle of artificial tears in Arya's pencil case. She would drop a few drops from time to time. Her big eyes were filled with a watery light, making her look even more pitiful. Soren, as a straight man, had no idea about these green tea tricks. Naturally, he thought that his beloved girlfriend had been wronged, so he put down his books and tried his best to make her happy. With her elegant and vivid writing style, she expressed the same meaning as my scumbag father who spewed out vulgar words, and the classmates who spread vulgar rumors. So, when she calmly concealed my note, she didn't have the slightest psychological burden. There was only a full sense of accomplishment of saving the flower on the high mountain. Even after she knew about my tragic experience in her previous life, she didn't care. She thought it was just a coincidence and that I was unlucky. Even in her heart, she deeply felt that this was what I deserved. Arya, an infamous campus belle, with poor grades, a scumbag family, and being poor and restless, actually dared to try to pull the abstinent male god off the altar. Naturally, I deserved to die. And Astor was spotless. Standing on the high ground of morality, Astor gave the note to Soren. On that night in my previous life that caused us to be separated by life and death, I saw the young man who came as promised under the street lamp and ran towards me. He ran a little hurriedly. When he stopped, there was a blush on his fair skin. There were beads of sweat on his short hair, and his black eyes seemed to be soaked in water, looking wet. He held an ice cream box in his hand and looked at me with a smile on his face. Sea salt chocolate. It was my favorite flavor. Soren was handsome, with fair skin, a straight nose, and deep eyebrows and eyes. Because he was slow to react to interpersonal communication, when he looked at people, there was a hint of innocent confusion. He was jokingly called the flower on the high mountain by the students in our school. Astor was always the first in the liberal arts class, and Soren was the top student in the science class, far ahead of others. Their parents were both university professors and lived on the same floor, with their doors facing each other. From any perspective, they should be a perfect match. But the persons or unliked was me. I joked with Soren that we were born in the wrong era. 20 years ago, the combination of a Cinderella and a Prince Charming like us was the mainstream of romance novels. But now the trend has changed. People emphasize being well-matched in social and economic status. I come from a humble background and am only worthy of being the vicious female supporting character. Soren held the ice cream, scooped out the last spoonful with a small spoon, and fed it into my mouth. He didn't say anything, just smiled with his lips pursed. In his bright black pupils, there was a beautiful and charming girl who was pouting and acting cockacously at him. He usually didn't talk much, and I was the one who chattered a lot. I was already used to his silence. He didn't need to speak. Just looking at me attentively was enough to satisfy me. I held the ice cream in my mouth, blinked my eyes, and was about to kiss him when he suddenly grabbed my hand and pressed it hard on his t-shirt, on the left side of his chest. Thump, thump, through the smooth and cool fabric, the strong and powerful heartbeat of a man was transmitted to my palm. He held my hand and wouldn't let me pull it away. I looked up, and he looked down at me. He said softly, "You will always be my leading lady, Arya." I blinked my eyes, smiled, and punched him. That's a corny love story. I punish you to say it again. His beautiful sword-shaped eyebrows furrowed, and he thought seriously. It seemed that this question of mine was more difficult for him than the final math problem. Before he could speak again, I had already leaned forward and kissed him to stop his words. Silly Soren. How could I dislike your love words? How could I bear to make you feel embarrassed? This kiss was lingering and passionate until we exhausted the last breath of oxygen in our chests. I gasped for breath and nestled in his arms, listening to the violent heartbeat coming from his whole chest, and said softly, "The college entrance examination is tomorrow. Soren, remember our promise." "Okay. I won't forget." His lips hovered over my head, and the hot air he exhaled made my scalp itch. I smiled and let him hold my hand as we walked in the park on a summer night. Astra knew that Soren and I had a college entrance examination promise, but she didn't know the specific content. She guessed that I must have asked Soren to accommodate me and deliberately get a low score in the college entrance examination. Someone who was originally capable of getting into a 985 university would finally perform poorly and go to a junior college with me. When I learned of her speculation, I was once so shocked that I couldn't speak. Is this the top student that I adored and envied with all my heart? Does such a strange way of thinking really not affect her studies? Could it be that in her heart, the boy she had secretly loved for many years had such low intelligence and had no free will at all, just like a clay doll that could be kneaded at will? Or did I learn some wonderful spellcasting technique that could make people's intelligence drop significantly in a targeted way? The promise between Soren and me was actually very simple. He would apply for the civil engineering department of a top domestic university, and I would work hard to get into the French department of a second-tier university in the same city. The reason why we kept it a secret from others was that Soren's family didn't allow him to apply for the civil engineering department. His parents wanted him to study medicine and become a respected department director of a Class A tertiary hospital in the future, driven by both a sense of justice and her love for Soren. Astra decided to conceal my note and prevent me from further influencing Soren's decision. This decision ultimately led to the tragedy of the three of us. I hope this time it's not too late for everything. At 8:30, Soren sent me home. When I got home, my father was unexpectedly not drunk and didn't yell at me either. He was sitting in the living room with his legs crossed, watching a football game. When he saw me open the door and come in, he just grunted, "Where have you been? Go to bed already. I have something to do tomorrow. You go to the examination hall by yourself." I didn't expect him to send me anyway. I shrugged and went back to my room. When I was changing my pajamas, I looked at myself in the mirror. I'm still alive. Every inch of my skin is soft. Every smile is bright. Every breath makes my chest heave. And every word I say vibrates the air. Everything represents being alive. I didn't die, didn't become a ghost, and didn't helplessly watch everything fall apart and reach an irreversible end. I clenched my fists. This time, I will walk into the college entrance examination hall together with my peers. This time, perhaps I can really hold hands with Soren and run towards the dreamy tomorrow. When the bell rang to signal the end of the last exam, I put down my pen. My arm ached terribly from the long period of tense writing. Outside the examination hall, there were parents everywhere, braving the scorching sun, holding drinks, and craning their necks to wait. The examinees either gathered together, anxiously comparing their answers, or were surrounded by their parents and left like heroes. The first person I saw was Astra. She was different from the excited examinees around her. In the past, I would have looked at her with starry eyes, admiring her calm and noble demeanor and regarding it as the aura of a top student. But now I knew that she was just repeating the experiences of her past life. Astra walked straight towards me. "Arya, how did you do in the exam?" she asked me. She rarely stooped to initiate a conversation with me before. Perhaps she wanted to verify her conjecture? "Not bad," I said truthfully. "I think there's a hope of reaching the second-tier university admission line." I didn't hypocritically ask her how she did in the exam. In her previous life, she was able to get into a first-class university. In this life, having a second chance, her grades would only be better. Astra, Soren, and I were all in the same examination room. While we were talking, Soren squeezed through the crowd holding 2 bottles of iced black tea and strode up to us. He handed one bottle to me, hesitated for a moment, and then asked Astra, "Do you want some water?" Astra shook her head and politely declined. Then she asked, "How did you do in the exam?" From the way she looked at Soren, I saw a flash of contempt and hatred. She desperately wanted to see Soren in trouble. This thought made me feel a chill run down my spine and a deep-seated coldness well up inside me. Soren didn't notice her abnormality. He had always been slow to react to other people's emotions. It was okay. This answer surprised Astra a bit, and she instinctively asked, "You didn't have a bad performance?" Soren was taken aback for a moment. "No." Astra was stunned for a moment. Shook her head. Gave me a deep look. And then turned and walked away. Soren was a bit confused. He turned to look at me and asked, "What's wrong with her?" I took a sip of the drink and gave him a coquettish glare. "What's wrong with your childhood sweetheart? You don't know yourself, so why are you asking me?" Soren shook his head and said seriously, "She's not my childhood sweetheart. But she's your goddess." "I thought you understood your goddess." I couldn't help laughing and said slowly, "She's not my goddess anymore. She's no longer that." Holding hands, we walked out of the examination hall laughing and joking. The TV station was doing a news report on the college entrance examination. The camera was aimed at the entrance of the examination hall. The host, holding a microphone, was interviewing a girl in front of the camera. It was Astra. Soren and I instinctively let go of each other's hands. But the camera had already swept past us mercilessly. In the local news that night, Soren and I became the center of attention. Handsome guy and beautiful girl go through the college entrance examination together. The whole world knows that you two are in a relationship. I'm so envious. This innocent campus love affair. I stared at the screen, feeling a chill run through my heart. So, this was another thing that Astra had changed after being reborn. In a clever way, she had exposed the relationship between Soren and me in full view of everyone. In her previous life, she didn't want Soren to hate her, so she didn't inform Soren's parents about our relationship. In this life, of course, she no longer intended to keep it a secret for us. However, according to her character setting, now she didn't plan to have any connection with Soren at all, so she definitely wouldn't go and inform on us herself. Then this scene on the TV program was very necessary. She took the initiative to go and accept the interview, so that the camera would be in the direction where we came out. She could expose the relationship between Soren and me, and at the same time, she could safely stay out of the incident. There was the sound of a key turning at the door. My father had come back. Just as I was about to go back to my room, my father entered the door, took 2 steps forward, grabbed my arm with one hand, and pulled me into the living room with brute force, swearing as he did so, "You little bitch. At such a young age, you've learned to flirt with men just like your mother? Who is that male student who came out with you? At such a young age. He doesn't learn well and even tries to flirt with a girl from my family? Did you let him sleep with you? I'm telling you, even if you're a rotten bitch, you're still my daughter. If he dares to sleep with you, I'll crush his testicles." I let out a scream, but he ignored it. He threw me onto the sofa, bent over slightly, and pointed at my nose, cursing, "You fucking remember this. You have to be a good woman and don't spread your legs for men so easily. Otherwise, I'd rather chop you up and feed you to the dogs than let you embarrass me like your mother did." He was uneducated. He was good at beating people, but not very good at cursing. Soon he ran out of words. He stopped to catch his breath, stared hard, and thought about what else to say. Taking this opportunity, I half prop up one's body, picked up a wine bottle from the table, and casually threw it at his forehead. He jumped aside in pain. I leapt up from the sofa, turned around, ran into the room, and locked the door behind me. There were sounds outside. He walked back and forth, opened the drawer, probably looking for alcohol cotton swabs. In our family, this was a more essential daily item than cooking oil, salt, soy sauce, vinegar, and tea. Soon, let out a low sigh. He started applying the medicine, hissing in pain, and swearing under his breath, "You stinking bitch. You little slut." After a while, I suddenly heard him talking to himself triumphantly. "Hey. She's ruthless and heartless. This is like me. Not like her promiscuous and shameless mother. She's truly my daughter." I leaned against the back of the door, slid down to the ground along the wooden door, and buried my face in my hands. Look. This was my terrible original family. My terrible biological parents. So I wasn't surprised at all that Astro looked down on me. I didn't even blame her too much. I was just curious. She kept saying that she loved Soren. But in her previous life, she regarded him as an untouchable flower on a high mountain. And in this life, she treated him like shit and garbage, thinking it was disgusting even to look at him. But from beginning to end, had she really ever tried to understand this man? Did she know what kind of person he was? Why he was so taciturn? And why he was so socially anxious and afraid of strangers? Because of what happened between Soren and me. My father had a fight with me. He didn't have a personal mobile phone. And I didn't dare to go to his house to find him. All I could do was wait anxiously. I lay on the bed, holding my phone, and watched as my classmates posted all kinds of photos of their gatherings in the class group. Some were singing karaoke. Some were having meals and drinking. And some individual classmates had already started their summer vacation carnival trips. No one contacted me. In everyone's mind, I was the daughter of a gangster. A little gangster myself. My father had stabbed someone to death in a gang fight and had served time in prison. My mother was a bad woman. She ran away with another man when I was 1 year old and left me with my elderly grandmother. My grandmother was a low-income urban resident who received subsistence allowances. She set up a fruit stall at the entrance of the alley to earn some hard-earned money. The old woman couldn't afford to buy expensive fruits. So most of the fruits on the stall were wrinkled and shriveled defective products. I suspected that on the surface, my grandmother was selling fruits. But in reality, she was playing the sympathy card. Fortunately, there were many naive and kind-hearted people in the world. Every winter night, the dim little light of my grandmother's stall could always attract some busy urban white-collar workers. Out of a bit of kindness, they would buy her fruits. Relying on a little bit of pitiful calculation and her tenacious hard work from dawn to dusk, my grandmother raised me until I was 12 years old, and then handed me over to my father, who had just been released from prison on parole. Her last words before she died were, "Take good care of Annan." My grandmother might not have been a morally perfect, good person in the secular sense. Her little fruit stall had somewhat of a hint of moral coercion. But to me, she was the best grandmother in the world. Whenever a kind person bought her fruits, my grandmother's face would light up like a chrysanthemum, and she would happily tell me that there were still more good people in the world. That was my first understanding of the principles of life. I had to be a good person so that my grandmother would be happy and like me. But my classmates didn't know this. In their eyes, I was pretty, had poor grades, and spoke with a sweet and delicate accent. I looked like someone who didn't study well at all. According to the rumors, I was the big sister of the underworld. On weekdays, I led a group of underlings and showed off my power outside. If I didn't like someone, I would drag them into the toilet and bully them. Behind me, there were the so-called big shots in the underworld supporting me. Of course, as the most vivid part of the whole rumor, it was naturally about how I sold my body to please those big shots and coaxed money out of them. In fact, it was very sad. As a so-called poor student and evil girl in the rumors, almost all of my spare time was spent on the keyboard. The main reason for my poor grades was that I was afraid of teachers. I instinctively resisted listening to them. I was afraid of both the male teacher who had tried to undress me and the female head teacher who had cursed me as a rotten bitch with a look of disgust on her face. Even later, when I went to a very good school and had good teachers, the hatred engraved in my bones made me unwilling to listen to classes and unwilling to admit that they were teachers. I always suspected that sooner or later they would reveal their true colors, which were ugly, flabby, greasy, fat, and ferocious. But I was especially good at writing compositions. My compositions were often taken as model essays by the teachers of the top classes. I was able to be assigned to the liberal arts class in high school also because the Chinese teacher appreciated my compositions. On a certain website, I was even able to earn money through writing. The classmate who went on a cruise trip posted the price list. Out of boredom, I calculated that the income from my writing was enough to cover the expenses for 2 people. After scrolling through the phone for a while, there was still no sound outside the window. I silently put down my phone and was about to go to bed. Just then, I heard 3 soft and rhythmic knocks on the window. It was Soren. My family lived on the second floor of a dormitory area of a state-owned factory. The building was a product of the 1970s and 1980s. It looked shabby on the outside and decayed on the inside. The only advantage was that there was a big tree outside the balcony. The trunk was huge. And there were many branches, which was very friendly to climbers. When I saw Soren through the window, my heart tightened. His face was pale, and his eyes were a bit glazed. After opening the door, he walked in, said nothing, hugged me tightly, and buried his head in my neck. I reached out and gently stroked the stubbly back of his head. After a while, I heard his intermittent and suppressed sobs in my ear. Every time Soren cried, it was as if a heavy rain had fallen in my heart, spreading far and wide, soaking the mountains and rivers. I couldn't cry. One of the reasons my mother abandoned me in the past was that I was born without the ability to shed tears. At first glance, I seemed to be a heartless and short-lived person, and raising me would bring no return. When I earned my first payment for a manuscript in high school, I secretly went to the hospital for an examination. The doctor said that I had underdeveloped tear glands from birth and needed to use artificial tears to relieve the symptoms of dry eyes. So, the artificial tears in my pencil case were really not a prop for being a green tea girl. If only Astor had deigned to ask me about it, I would have told her. But she didn't think it was necessary to have an in-depth conversation with me. In contrast to me, Soren was actually very prone to crying. The first time I had an encounter with him was in the school gymnasium after school. I accidentally saw him sitting in the corner, with his face buried in his hands, crying silently. Just like every time I saw someone crying, I walked up to him and handed him a pack of tissues. He waved his hand, not looking up to see who it was, and just said in a hoarse voice, telling me to go away. I quietly sat down beside him, in the dark corner without any light. I sat on the ground just like him, hugging my knees and quietly looking at him. I watched as his shoulders would occasionally twitch slightly and abruptly, and his abdomen rose and fell rapidly like a frog's. I watched as his breathing was rapid and shallow, as if every inhalation was forced out of his throat before it could reach his lungs. What would it feel like to have a good cry? When he was tired from crying, he put down his hands, and his red eyes blankly swept across the gymnasium in the twilight. When he saw me, he was startled and stammered in surprise. You, why haven't you left yet? I stood up and patted my buttocks. I'm leaving right away. Thank you, classmate. He frowned, probably angry. But at the same time, my words piqued his curiosity. Thank me? For what? Thank you for crying for me. I smiled at him. I was born unable to cry. Do you know how painful that is? Watching you cry made me feel as if I had cried myself. And it was so satisfying. After that time, Soren and I gradually grew closer. He told me his secret. In the eyes of outsiders, Soren, the favored son of heaven, had a pair of seemingly perfect parents who shone brightly. They were PhDs who studied in the United States. Professors, with witty conversation and courtesy. No one knew that this couple was only united in name. But they were surprisingly consistent in how to simply and effectively raise their son. From childhood to adulthood, everything Soren had to meet his parents' efficient requirements. After every meal, he had to put the tableware in the designated place. The bowls had to be as clean as if they had been washed. And there couldn't be any rice grains on the chopsticks. Bowls and chopsticks that weren't licked clean meant adding trouble to washing the dishes. He was only allowed to eat one piece of fruit a day. No more because they were afraid he would have diarrhea. And no less because a lack of vitamins would make him sick. He wasn't allowed to eat snacks of any kind, in case he got sick and had diarrhea. Getting sick meant trouble. In short, all of Soren's human activities were based on the premise of not adding extra burdens to his parents. As a boy on the verge of adulthood, Soren wasn't allowed to lock the door of his room. And he didn't even have a mobile phone of his own. In order to show that they were civilized people, his parents specially bought the latest iPhone and placed it on the dining table in the living room, stating that it was the family's public mobile phone. Soren could use it, But he wasn't allowed to change the password. What would be the consequences if he violated his parents' instructions? His parents were highly educated intellectuals. Of course they wouldn't swear and use violence like my scumbag father. But their family had a specially made small dark room, which used special soundproof and light-blocking materials. Once the lights were turned off, all external sounds and light would disappear. His parents thought this was a more civilized form of punishment. Every time Soren talked about that small dark room, he would tremble all over. His earliest memory of that small dark room was when he was 5 years old. On his way home from school, he met his father's graduate student. That big brother who loved to laugh treated him to an ice cream. And then casually told his father about this little incident. His father locked him in the small dark room for a whole day. Not only did he make him go hungry, but he also made him relieve himself in there and didn't allow him to come out. How did a 5-year-old boy stay with his own excrement in that absolute darkness for a full 24 hours of complete isolation? Not a minute or a second more or less? He must have cried until he lost his voice. And he must have shouted until his throat was hoarse. But the world was completely silent, with only his cries and shouts. Finally, having fulfilled my obsession, even his cries and shouts grew weaker. He might have heard the sound of his own urine soaking his pants, the sound of blood rushing through his veins, and the sound of his own heart beating in his chest. Every time I thought of his experience, I would shudder. Instantly, heavily, I felt that my scumbag father, who had committed crimes and swore all the time, was somewhat endearing. For someone like Soren. Of course, crying wasn't allowed. It was a symbol of trouble. It meant that the adults had to spend time dealing with his emotions. So he could only hide and cry in a place where no one was around. But the school wasn't safe either. For example, on that day, it could have been me who entered the gymnasium, or it could have been someone else. I told him he could come to my home, go to my room, close the door, and cry however he wanted. I held his hand and took him to see that big tree, and pointed to the small balcony with the big wind chime. That's my room. Whether the light is on or not, you can knock on my window. Just 3 knocks. And I'll know it's you. And I'll open the door for you. During the summer vacation of our sophomore year in high school, Soren went to my home for the first time. It was after the class division exam. During the exam, because he had a fever and wasn't in good condition, his grades dropped to the 5th place in the grade. He received the punishment of being confined in the dark room for 2 days. When Soren came to my home, he was like a ghost. His short hair was messy and dirty. His face was unshaven. And his eyes were listless. What worried me the most was the thick bandage on his arm. He had attempted suicide. But just before losing consciousness, he thought of me and our promise. Once we finish college, we can go far away so that the adults can never find us again. At that moment, my voice was like the sound of nature, summoning him back from the brink of despair. He fumbled to find the bandage in the drawer, stopped the bleeding, and applied the medicine. Then he sat back at the desk and quietly did the practice questions. When his parents saw the wound on his wrist, they chose to turn a blind eye, asking nothing and saying nothing. It was as if they were afraid that once they opened their mouths, they would bring endless trouble. After dinner, he put the rice bowl back in the designated place properly, and then said he was going to find a classmate to discuss the questions and walked out of the house. He came to my home using the method I told him. When he was crying intermittently and choking with sobs, I didn't know how to comfort him. On an impulse, I kissed his lips. That was our kiss that sealed our love. So, in a way, between Soren and me, I was indeed the one who took the initiative. Perhaps this was one of the pieces of evidence that Astra thought I was shameless. In my previous life, Soren didn't know about my death until after the college entrance examination was over. I don't know how it happened either. After I died, my soul didn't disperse. Instead, it floated around him and Astra. He rushed to my home like a madman and happened to meet my father sorting through my belongings in my room. He was beaten by my father, with blood streaming down his head. He didn't know how to fight back, and he didn't even know how to cover his head. He just stood there submissively, hoarsely begging, "Uncle. Uncle, haha. Please give Arya back to me. Please give her back to me." Please. My father knocked out several of his teeth and made his cheeks swell up. His speech was slurred. But he still seemed oblivious and kept repeating. Please. Who you? Please. Giving Ga back to me. It was Astor who rushed to our home and threatened to call the police that my father stopped and drove them out of the house. Astor accompanied him and sat in the cold downstairs of my home until dawn the next day. It was also she who answered the phone call from Soren's parents on his behalf and told them that Soren was helping her with a project and needed to stay up all night. Soren's parents had always seemed amiable in the eyes of outsiders. So of course they didn't say anything. During that dark and hopeless time, it was Astor who accompanied Soren through it. It was she who discovered his attempts to commit suicide time and time again. It was she who tried every means to make him eat, forced him to walk, and made him talk, even after the college entrance examination results were announced. It was she who, together with Soren's parents, filled out Soren's college application for him. It wasn't medicine because his mental state wasn't suitable for it. Instead, it was changed to the computer science department of another university. It was in the same city as the university she attended. Over the course of 4 years, she gradually made her way into his heart bit by bit. After graduation, they stayed in that city and worked together. After their work became stable, Soren proposed to her. Soren didn't want a wedding. He was afraid of seeing his parents, whom he had been avoiding for 4 years, at the wedding. But Astor strongly persuaded him. She needed a grand wedding to put a perfect end to her years of bitter secret love. Soren fulfilled her wish. Even though he was so stiff in front of his parents at the wedding that he moved his hands and feet in an awkward way and was teased by the MC, who said he was so happy that he couldn't walk properly. After marriage, she often complained that Soren was cold and polite to her, not at all as passionate as he had been towards me back then. I was puzzled. Wasn't it exactly this cold and abstinent style of Soren that she had liked in the past? Why didn't she like it anymore now? She also saw another side of Soren. One day, Soren received a phone call from his father. His father criticized him on the phone for being a failure in life, for not being able to get promoted in the company after so long, and for not having any outstanding achievements. Even if he wanted to change jobs, no headhunters were interested in him. Even though he was separated from his father by the telephone line, his body kept shaking. After hanging up the phone, he squatted down like a child, covering his face with his hands, and tears flowed out from between his fingers. When Astor came out and saw this, she was greatly surprised and blurted out, "Why are you sitting here crying? Are you still a man?" Although she immediately apologized for her words, very sincerely, and apologized again in the evening and the next day as well. But I knew that throughout that whole day, Soren's body kept shaking. I was familiar with him like this. It was him desperately trying to control his desire to cry. It was his soul struggling with his body. His soul was howling in pain, while his body refused to shed even a single tear. From then on, he really stopped crying. Several years after my death, my inability to shed tears transferred to him. After that, in the 8th year of their marriage, Astor had been insisting on preparing for pregnancy. But Soren told her that he had no interest in having children, and that they could be a DINK double income no kids couple. If Astor didn't have confidence in the future, he could have a vasectomy, the irreversible kind. But Astor didn't want that. She liked children and wanted at least 2 children of Soren's. They had an argument about this matter. Under a gloomy mood, Astor went to the study and accidentally discovered a long-forgotten iron box. She took it out from the deepest part of the drawer. Before opening the box, she had already guessed what was inside. She wasn't wrong. There were all the memories of me and Soren. The notes filled with silly love words we wrote to each other. The movie tickets we had watched together. The receipts from the milk tea shop with drawn hearts. The reading list we planned to read. And a strange phone number. Astor didn't know what number it was and casually put it aside. But I was in a daze beside her. And my whole soul began to burn, feeling sour and hot. I remembered that number. During the winter vacation of our sophomore year in high school, once he passed by the entrance of our community with his parents. The longing to see me overwhelmed everything. But he couldn't get away. This socially anxious person actually mustered up the courage to borrow a phone from a passing aunt. The first sentence he said to me when he called from that strange number was a low sob with a nasal tone. "Arya, I miss you so much." Astra flipped to the end and found a piece of paper. She held it in her hand, and her hand began to tremble. That was the life list that Soren and I had made. Go to university together. Go abroad together. Travel around the world on a cruise ship together. Have a child. The last wish completely broke her down. Soren happened to come back and saw this scene. He stood at the door, lost in a daze for a long time, and even forgot to comfort Astra, who was crying so miserably. In fact, he hadn't taken out that box for a long time. Since they got married, Soren had forbidden himself from looking back on the past memories. If Astra had been calm enough, she should have been able to notice the dust piled up on the box. If Soren had been attentive, it would have been easy to explain away this misunderstanding. But neither of them said anything. Astra was an educated person and paid great attention to her demeanor. Soon, let out a low sigh. She dried her tears, stood up, and said as calmly as possible, "Your parents are here. Let's go to the airport to pick them up." Soren's body stiffened reflexively for a moment. But looking at Astra's red eyes from crying, he silently nodded. Soren's parents were invited by Astra. She hoped that they could persuade Soren face to face regarding the matter of having a child. On the way to the airport, for some unknown reason, Astra started to mention me. That taboo name, which had been sealed for nearly 8 years, slipped out of her mouth like a ghost. "Do you know? The night before the college entrance examination, Arya originally wanted to ask you out. But I didn't want her to affect your college entrance examination. So I didn't give you the note. I wanted to rush over and cover her mouth. And I wanted to close Soren's ears. But I had no physical form and couldn't change anything. I could only watch helplessly as Soren, who had been concentrating on driving, slowly turned his head inch by inch. Looking like a mentally ill person whose brain had lost its function, he asked her naively, "What did you say?" I didn't understand. Astra had already let out a scream in fright. "Look at the road. Soren. Concentrate on driving." "What are you doing?" Soren still asked her. "What did you just say?" "I said I didn't give you her note." "Soren. This matter has been 8 years ago. Arya has long been dead. Be reasonable." "So that's how it is." Soren nodded, turned his head blankly, and murmured something. I floated over to listen. He was saying, "Arya. Arya. I miss you so much. So much." The next moment, I saw with my own eyes that he calmly turned the steering wheel and stepped on the accelerator. The car drew a strange curve on the bridge over the river, broke through the guardrail, and flew into the air towards the river surface. "No, Soren. I don't want you to do this. I want you to live. To live well." I screamed and dived towards him, wanting to lift the car, to push Soren away, to open the car door, but I couldn't do anything. Finally, heading wide, I stopped in mid-air, trembling and crying loudly. "Soren. I don't need you to do this. It doesn't matter if you marry Astra. It doesn't matter if you have a lot of children. It doesn't matter if you completely forget me. I just want you to live well. Cry for me. Laugh for me. Feel love and being loved for me. And treat the world well for me." But no matter how loudly I cried or how miserably I shouted, still no one knew. It was not until more than 10 minutes after the car had completely sunk into the water that the space around me fluctuated. In a flash, Astra and I were sent back to the time before the college entrance examination together. I finally knew why I couldn't be reincarnated or reborn. Because this was a story. Astra was the female lead. In her previous life, she saved Soren. But 8 years later, she was retaliated against by Soren and paid the price with her life. In this life, the story truly begins. This time, she won't save Soren's fate again. She will stand by and watch as Soren and I head towards madness and destruction. Today's TV program about the college entrance examination was the first big gift she gave us after being reborn. When Soren appeared in front of me, just like the first time he came to my house in our sophomore year of high school, he was pale and broken. The moment I opened the door, he had already hugged me tightly. So forcefully and fiercely that I even felt a dull pain in my ribs. He quickly let go of me, opened his backpack, and inside were his ID card and student ID card. He looked at me and said softly, "My dad wants me to break up with you." He locked me in a dark room and said I could only come out when I figured it out. This time I didn't give in. I had a fight with him. Arya. No wonder there were bloodstains on his face and his mouth was bruised and swollen. I reached out to touch it. And he winced in pain and turned his head aside. After a while, he leaned in again and gently rubbed the uninjured side of his face against my palm. Like a homeless puppy. He murmured, "You're a girl. And you dared to fight with your dad. I can't be outdone by you." I couldn't help laughing. I'm not an ordinary girl. I'm a female gangster. Soren couldn't stay at my place for a long time. After discussing with him, we decided to go on a trip at this time. I simply told my scumbag dad that I was going out with a female classmate. Amid his curses, I packed my luggage and went out without changing my expression. He chased after me and stuffed a card into my pants pocket. "Your dad has money. There's 5,000 yuan on this card. Come back to me when you've used it up. In short, tell your dad if you're short of money. Don't think of any crooked ways. And don't follow in your mother's footsteps." Before he could say more unpleasant things, I quickly pulled my suitcase and ran out of the dormitory compound. So, unlike in the previous life, after the college entrance examination, Soren was almost kicked out of his home. Aster called me once. She politely asked me if I knew where Soren was. When she spoke, she deliberately showed an air of indifference to cover up the schadenfreude behind her words. "It's not that I'm worried about him. It's just that we've been neighbors. My parents are also very worried. You know how badly he's fallen out with his family because of you. Soren's dad and Soren's mom only have him as their son. Soren has always been their pride. It's normal that the old folks can't accept it all of a sudden that he's secretly dating a girl. Especially considering your family situation." I poked Soren, who was nibbling at my neck, away with one finger and answered seriously. "Soren is very sad and blames himself now. He wants to go back but is afraid that his parents won't forgive him. And he should be responsible for me, right? I won't let him go back for a while." Soren let out a muffled snort, rolled over and sat up from me. His black glassy eyes were full of confusion, and he looked at me angrily. Well, I couldn't explain it to him. Astra's reincarnation was just to see him down and out, with no way out. And to see me degraded and fallen, turning into a scheming woman. Asta was obviously very satisfied with my answer. Her voice became much lighter. So much so that it lacked the necessary sincerity. "We old neighbors will help persuade your uncle and aunt. Tell him not to worry. When he figures it out, he should go back and apologize as soon as possible." She didn't try to persuade me. Maybe she thought it was a waste of words to do so. Or maybe she hoped that I would drag Soren down and make us fall even deeper. The college entrance examination admission notices came out. Just like in the previous life, Asta was admitted to the best university without any suspense. Unlike in the previous life, Soren and she were not in the same city. This time, Soren didn't major in computer science anymore. Instead, he chose the university with the best civil engineering major in the country. Many people shook their heads and sighed, thinking that with Soren's high scores, it was really a waste of talent to apply for this major. Astor posted a picture on her WeChat Moments. The picture was of an expensive dog running to compete for food with a mongrel. The text was, "Everything has its cause and effect. Don't miss. Don't disturb." Soren took a look at it on my phone but didn't understand what it meant. Only I knew what she meant. She was warning herself that she would never show excessive kindness again and would never interfere with others' cause and effect relationships. Since Soren was willing to be a mongrel, she could only respect and wish him well. In the comment section, everyone was flattering her. The realm of meditation of the top student sister is truly beyond our reach. Ordinary people are too stupid and hope to be enlightened. Probably, heading to Felbleu. In this world, only I was her secret confidant. Thinking about it this way, she was also pitiful. She managed to pull out successfully. But no one knew. She escaped from the sea of bitterness. Yet no one celebrated. In such a situation, How could it be just a matter of unwillingness? Soren and I started our lovey-dovey college life. Besides my studies, I was still busy writing. The money from my writing was enough to cover my college tuition and accommodation fees. Soren was very stubborn. After his family cut off his financial support, he gritted his teeth and went to a tutoring institution. He was the provincial champion in physics, and he specialized in one-on-one tutoring. After a semester, he not only earned enough for his tuition but also gradually overcame his social anxiety. During the 4 years of college, we supported each other and had each other's backs. We both achieved remarkable results in our respective schools and majors. Astra also had a fulfilling life. Her WeChat moments were full of high-end lectures. Friends of various ethnic groups, including black, white, and brown people. She really had learned and refined people to talk and interact with. She would occasionally call me and pretend to casually inquire about the latest situation between Soren and me. Of course, I would pick out the unsatisfactory aspects of Soren and my life and exaggerate them when telling her, so that she could always have the feeling that Arya and Soren are living a life worse than that of pigs and dogs, biting each other like dogs and tearing each other apart as they head towards ruin. She was satisfied. I was also satisfied. After all, she was the female lead. Only when she truly let go and stopped prying into Soren and my life would I be able to feel at ease. In our senior year, Astra announced her boyfriend on her WeChat moments. He was a postgraduate student majoring in the same subject who was 2 years ahead of her. I was overjoyed. Soren snatched my phone and said, "Sorry. You care too much about Astra. Sometimes I really wonder who you like more, me or her." I rolled my eyes at him and said, "Guess?" His handsome eyebrows and eyes flashed, and with a very threatening smile, he pressed his whole body on me, took my earlobe in his mouth, and his voice was muffled. "I don't want to guess. I want you to be mine. Always mine, Arya. I'm yours too. Forever and always. Only yours. Arya. Arya." I won't tell him that the boyfriend Astra found looks somewhat like him from the side. But my happiness didn't last for half a year. Astra broke up with her boyfriend. She started calling me again. I was extremely annoyed but had to deal with her carefully. Soren and I started looking for jobs. It wasn't going well. You know, we've been arguing on and off for these 4 years. We have no money and it's all supported by my dad. But he acted tough while relying on me and even cheated. I wasn't going to be outdone, so I cheated on him in return. Anyway, heading fulfilled wide sigh. Our life is in a mess with a bunch of troubles. Our studies are in a mess and we don't have any certificates. Which company would want us? She wasn't as easily fooled by me as before. After a long silence, she suddenly asked, "Does Soren still love you?" Love? Ah. No. What is love anyway? Poor couples have sorrows and everything. We don't match each other in social status and have no common topics. Once the passionate period is over, where is there any love? It's all full of trivial matters. I come from a petty bourgeois family with a narrow vision and can't understand him. He also puts on airs and looks down on me. Sigh. Pair people don't have the right to fall in love. She was finally satisfied and hung up the phone. I wiped the sweat off my face, and my heart was still fluttering. I'm running out of ideas for making up stories. The next time she calls, should I tell her that Soren sold me to Myanmar to have my kidney removed? Or that I sold Soren to Thailand to become a ladyboy? I quickly signed the work contract with Soren. Our goals and directions were set in the year of our college entrance examination. He joined a state-owned enterprise and volunteered to be stationed in Africa for a long time. As I majored in French, I could work as a translator and clerk at Chinese construction sites in Africa. Once we go there, it's a long way away. And Miss Astra, who is noble and righteous, should have a hard time finding us. Amitabha. 10 years later, Soren and I finished our assignment abroad. With the high subsidies we had saved over the years and my millions of yuan in manuscript fees, I have to full-length documentary novels set in Africa that are very popular. And even physical book publishers are interested and have contacted me to discuss publication matters. We bought a house with a yard and a big tree in a coastal city and settled down. Soren and I found new jobs. And we also found a suitable public primary school for our daughter. Joy grew up in Africa. As a person of Asian descent, she is as dark as an eel. When she smiles, you can only see her teeth. And she's so dark that you can't find her even if you throw her into a pile of coal. She can speak Chinese fluently. But when it comes to exams, her weaknesses are revealed, especially in the ancient Chinese part. I was so angry that I chased her around the yard with a feather duster. Are you still a Chinese person? Even the black sisters can speak Chinese better than you. She knows she has her father's support, so she's not afraid of me. Like an African monkey, she quickly climbed up the tree. Well, this tree climbing skill is just like her father's. I used a fishing rod to drive her down from the tree. When I turned around, her father came. The father and daughter hugged each other and pretended to shiver. These two drama queens performed a wah-wah scene for me on the spot. To be honest, with Soren's current look, which is just as naughty and tough as his daughter's, there's not the slightest trace of the melancholy prince and the abstinent male god he used to be. If the female protagonist saw him now, she would surely shed tears and shake her head. It's really a situation that makes men silent and women cry. And there's no greater sorrow. After my scumbag father bombarded me with phone calls tirelessly for 8 years, he suddenly stopped. Because my heartless mother, who abandoned her husband and daughter back then, was tired of playing outside and came back like a tired bird returning to its nest. Surprisingly, my scumbag father also agreed to let her come back. It seems that they didn't go through the formal divorce procedures back then. So maybe they don't need to remarry now? Now these two old and bad people stage fights at home every day, and are keen on calling me to expose each other's secrets. I wanted to curse that heaven has eyes and that the wicked will be punished by the wicked. But listening to the commotion on the other end of the phone, I silently swallowed those words back. I think I'm scolding them. But maybe they think I'm showing great filial piety and sincerely blessing them. Soren has cut off contact with his parents for many years. And there has been no news between them. The only possibility of having an intersection in the future is to receive a lawyer's letter asking him to fulfill his obligation to support his parents in their old age or to handle inheritance matters. I estimate that the former is less likely. There is an unconfirmed saying in the public that a small number of people in the highly educated group are emotionally indifferent. This is true for Soren's parents. They have their own academic and career pursuits that can bring them a sense of satisfaction. For them, having possède my obsession. Their children don't mean joy but rather an obligation and burden that they have to bear in the social sense. They treated this additional burden in a simple and rough way and were not friendly at all. That's why when Soren left home, except for making a few perfunctory phone calls in the first few years of his college life, his parents had no intention of seriously looking for him and asking him to come back. After Soren and I had Joy, his parents only met her dutifully once via video call and didn't show the interest that most elderly people having young children. Even when we gave Joy this neither to Chinese nor to Western name, his parents had no objections. It seems that not disturbing each other is the last bottom line and respect we have for each other. Just when everything was gradually getting on track, I received a phone call that had been silent for a long time again. Arya, you and Soren are back in the country? Come out for a cup of tea and let's have a chat. I paused for a moment. And the string in my mind that had been relaxed for a long time slowly tightened. Should I ask Soren to come with me? Astor was silent for a while. I clearly heard her let out a breath on the other end of the phone. Very softly and quickly. No need to call him. Let's just have a gathering between the two of us women. Come to think of it, Astor and I were desk mates for a period of time in high school. In the eyes of the world, our relationship should be closer. Rather than Soren, with whom she had a love-hate relationship and was entangled for many years in her previous life. Astor specially bought a plane ticket and flew over from the city where she worked. We met at the bar of the 5-star resort hotel where she was staying. When she appeared, she was wearing a Burberry trench coat, custom-made casual flat-heeled leather shoes, and her hair was dyed a deep chestnut red with big waves that reached her shoulders. Her makeup was exquisite, and her features were as beautiful as a painting. She was completely different from the top student and league branch secretary I remembered, who used to have a simple ponytail, wear black-rimmed glasses, and focus only on studying and not care about anything else. Of course, time has not only changed her, it has also changed me. The delicate and charming girl who used to love being pretty, long hair, the style of a seaweed sprite, and shiny bling-bling accessories is now a super cool middle-aged woman with short hair, a wheat-colored complexion, and always wearing an oversized flight jacket and carrot pants. After the time of our previous life and this life, which adds up to 30 or 40 years, we looked at each other and nodded politely. After we sat down, the waiter brought us drinks. She spoke first, with a tone that was affirmative and brooked no argument. "You lied to me, Arya. You've been lying to me all along." I put down the coffee spoon, looked up, and calmly stared at her. "You wanted to deceive yourself, and I was just helping you." The hand holding the spoon suddenly tightened, and her pupils shrank to the size of pinholes. "We are both smart people. We don't need many words. A little hint is enough." "You were also reborn?" she murmured, not really expecting an answer, but more like talking to herself. "I've always had this suspicion, but I didn't want to believe it. I'd rather believe that what you said was true, that you and Soren were like dogs fighting each other and going to hell together, than believe that you were lying to me and that you actually led a happy life." "Yes, that was I. If Soren and I were really happy together, then everything she did in her previous life would have made her look like a clown, wouldn't it? You know, when she concealed my note back then, she truly considered herself righteous and wanted to save the favored son of heaven who had gone astray. If this supporting point was broken, how could she justify herself within her own logic? How could she occupy the moral high ground? But she quickly found a way. "You were also reborn. Then I understand." She crossed her hands and placed them on the marble table, with a dignified posture. "I guess you must have thoroughly repented and turned over a new leaf. So you changed the fate of you and Soren." "Excuse me?" These words were full of condescending scrutiny and arrogance from beginning to end. "Miss Astra, even today, you still don't understand the root cause of your failure in both of your lives. Do you?" I also sat back, straightened my back, and looked at her on an equal level. "I haven't repented. Because there's nothing for me to repent of. I'm still the same person as in my previous life. Soren is also the same Soren as in his previous life. You lived opposite him, but from childhood to adulthood, you didn't notice his silent predicament or hear his silent cries for help. You didn't accept his weakness and his crying. You only wanted to fantasize about a perfect flower on the high mountain, to satisfy your own imagination. And you, just like in your previous life, are still arrogant and can't see the real people, only the simple and false person as. In your heart, you stubbornly believe that only people with good grades are worthy of people with good grades. Only families of equal social status are worthy of having truly strong love and marriage. Poor people are only worthy of being lascivious, lowly and vicious, because poverty breeds wicked thoughts. Rich people can be noble, kind and just, because wealth engenders a sense of morality. But there is also an old saying that goes, "It is often the humble but righteous people who show loyalty, while it is often the educated who are heartless." You think my family is poor and my grades are bad, and that when I get close to Soren, I can only drag him to hell. But have you ever thought that grades are not the only factor that determines a person's life? And there is more than one path to success. Just like looking for a life partner is not like doing a math problem. There is no such thing as something being taken for granted. People spend their whole life searching in the vast sea of people for that individual who can make their soul complete. Who can make them feel pain or tears, laughter or joy. He or she doesn't have to be perfect, excellent, wealthy, or even healthy. But once you find that person, your soul will tell you that it's him or her, and he or she makes you feel that everything is worth it. This kind of relationship is not necessarily healthy, like my scumbag parents. In any sense, they are the opposite of exemplary parents. But I have to say that they might truly be the only one for each other. Even including Soren's parents. They can live together coldly under the same roof for a lifetime and treat their son in the same way. Isn't this also a kind of strange symbiotic relationship? Life is not a pre-drawn template that only shows what is healthy, positive, perfect and morally noble. Life is a complex palette where light and darkness coexist, and meanness and nobility are present side by side. All things are born with diversity. And that's what makes the world wonderful. Everyone is the master of their own life, making decisions under free will and taking on the risks and responsibilities oneself. That's the joy of being human. There must be his own reasons why Soren loves me. What right do you have to stand high above and arbitrarily decide for him what is good and what is bad? Once your so-called kindness is not accepted, you will try your best to step on Soren and me into the stinky gutter, to the very bottom of hell. Do you want us to rot and stink so that we can repent, atone for our sins, and set off your foresight, kindness, and integrity? Just because you study well and come from a good family background, are you the righteous, morally noble and unchallengeable God? Should everything you want be placed on a golden plate and presented to you respectfully? Astra, you should wake up. The real world doesn't exist around your will. It has its own logic. If you can't see through it and can't accept it, then you will always pin the hope of your happy life on the bad luck of Soren and me. You will always be without freedom. As soon as I finished speaking, a cup of coffee was splashed in my face. Fortunately, hadn't I didn't wear makeup today, and the jacket I was wearing was loose. The t-shirt inside got wet, but it didn't look abnormal from the outside. I took out a tissue, wiped off the cream on my face, and waved to the extremely nervous waiter beside me. After paying for my own cup of coffee, I stood up and looked at the woman opposite me. She was trembling all over. The glittery eyeshadow was smeared into a mess because of the violent trembling of her eyelids, and the blush couldn't hide the paleness of her face. Astra, leave us alone. Just think of it as, for the sake of the fact that I once worshipped you passionately. Or, for the sake of the fact that I died a miserable death in my previous life, which was somewhat related to you. Live your own life well and don't come to find me again. When I got home, Soren and Joey were lying under the tree. There were two big open cardboard boxes beside them, and inside were various sizes and thicknesses of wooden materials. Joey said some time ago that she wanted a treehouse, but the halo effect she had on me in this life has long since vanished. Damn it. These two are way too fast. If I had come back a little later, I'm afraid I wouldn't even have a chance to do the last few steps of the work. When the treehouse was done, on a sudden inspiration, I found the palette, and the three of us painted freely on the treehouse with our colorful fingers. Soren had just stolen a kiss from me when he suddenly froze and exclaimed, "I have soup boiling in the pot." With his hands spread out, he rushed into the back kitchen like a rabbit hit by an arrow. Joey happily burrowed into my arms, and, when I wasn't paying attention, smeared my face with paint. I looked around for a handy branch. "You're rebelling, you little rascal. Have you written your composition for today?" She jumped off the tree with a scream and slipped into the kitchen. I stood in front of the treehouse holding the branch, looking at my child, my lover, and my home. In the noisy twilight, the world and I smiled knowingly together. Life is so wonderful. The end.